Hey everyone, it's Jeremy with Teletone, and I am thrilled to announce today that we are releasing one of the most ambitious instruments that we've ever attempted. This is our first comprehensive mono-poly synth. I present to you Oracle. Several years ago, we released a synth trilogy based on a piano suite by Maurice Ravel, and we internally jokingly called these synthesizers because they were a very simplified version of a synthesizer. All of the controls were tucked under the hood, and most of the functionality was able to be controlled by two large macro knobs on the front of the instrument. And to this day, that synth trilogy remains a favorite by a lot of our users and customers. People like different things. A lot of you really liked the simplicity of it, that you could just flip through presets and they're basically ready to go. A lot of you like the sounds, but you gave us some feedback that you wanted more control over the sounds. And so I'm really excited because with Oracle, both of these types of customers are just getting more of what they're looking for. More control, more presets. Oracle includes over 300 presets, which is more than double of anything we've done before. Every one of these presets was created by the instrument. There is nothing tucked under the hood. There is nothing out of reach. And everything that we have made with it, you are able to make as well. I'll dive into this a little bit deeper in another video, but Oracle was created from and inspired by some very legendary mono synths. We sampled the Moog Model D, the Korg MS-20, the Sequential Circuits Pro-One, the Roland SH-101, the Moog DFAM, and then a really strange, quirky synth made by Moog called the Sonic Six, which I really would like to do a whole separate video on because it is a very bizarre synth, and I'm a proud owner of one now. So with all of these synths, we sampled and captured all of the basic waveforms, but we also went a step further and we captured the process of taking some of those basic waveforms and then modulating and transforming them using the actual analog controls. And then inside the instrument, we programmed it to where you can use the mod wheel to modulate in and out of these basic waveforms into these really complex, complicated oscillations that we recorded with the analog synth. When we get to the presets portion near the end of this video, I'll kind of demonstrate a little bit what I'm talking about. We'll put the presets at the end, so if you just want to hear some sounds, feel free to just hop over to that chapter on the presets towards the end of this video. Last thing I want to say before we jump in, and I know that I say this every time we release a new instrument, but our focus has not changed as a company. We want to create the path of least resistance between you and your creativity. We want to make things that are simple, intuitive, easy to use, that are instantly inspiring. Even though we are building a more comprehensive synth, and if you aren't familiar with synthesizers, it could be intimidating to look at first glance. We have put a lot of care into making sure that this is intuitive. And I would even go a step farther and say that we set things up in a way that the Oracle will kind of teach you how to use it as you use it. And part of the reason we care so much about the education of learning how to use this synth is that we do plan on making more of these. This is going to be the first in a series of comprehensive synths that we do. And so we really wanted to make it easy for you to get on board if you are not normally someone that's able to just jump in and understand the controls of a synthesizer. And maybe you're going to start by just loading up presets and clicking through sounds. Like I said, there's 300 of them. And the next step is going to be, you're going to start changing some of those sounds and tweaking some of them. And then before long, I am certain that you will be making presets of your own once you get the hang of it. But you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, so I think it's probably time to jump in. So this is the layout for Oracle. You can see that we have an A and a B. This represents two oscillators. And right off the bat, some of you are like, oscillators, what's oscillating? Well, it's just a fancy word for basically a source or a sound. So we are not labeling things like oscillator, VCA, VCF, because we feel like they're not the most intuitive labels in this setting. So we have two sources you can pull from, and you can turn them on or off by clicking them. So under here you can see that there is a browser you can click on. And when you click here, you can see all the different synthesizers that I mentioned in the intro, and then some digital wavetables as well. And every source in here has been assigned a tag. And so you can organize by basic shapes, custom shapes, analog mod, and then analog mod heavy. This analog mod heavy group are going to be the sources where we did some really crazy things with the analog synth itself. And then you can use these to modulate to basic forms in and out of them, build presets with them or whatnot. Then there's some non-sustaining ones. The DFAM is not, it doesn't technically have infinite sustain, it has a really long decay, but these do not infinitely sustain, so they're in their own category. You will also notice that there is the option for none, which might seem a little bit odd, but you might want to choose none because we'll get into this a little bit later on, but there is a noise and a sub knob which you can assign to A or B. And you may not want to layer your sub with another thing. You may want to use one oscillator side for your sub only, and then you may want to layer that with something else. But that is why that's an option. And I use that quite a bit more than you would think initially. It's probably worth mentioning that these are not presets. These are just sources. The preset browser is down here. Okay, so below the source browser, we have volume, pan, octave, and tune, which do what you think they would. The octave knob goes up and down 2 octaves. Below that, we have the envelope section. And there are 2 different tabs here. And you might be, if you're used to the analog world, you might be used to seeing VCA, VCF. We've simplified this to make it a little more accessible, just calling it volume and filter. You can link the envelopes or you can unlink them. And what an envelope is, in case you didn't know, it's basically a way to shape the source. And you can affect the attack, decay, sustain, and release. For the attack, you can mess with the curve to make it more concave or convex, if I'm using those terms correctly. And so when you move the attack slider, it's going to slow the fade in. The decay is basically how long it takes to get from the attack phase to the sustain phase. The sustain is basically the resting phase of it. If you turn it all the way up, it's going to, with most of these sources, it's going to sustain forever. If you turn it down, it will continue to sustain, but much quieter after it passes the decay stage. If we turn the sustain all the way down, then the decay is going to determine how long the note rings out for. And then release, I was using the pedal here, but I'm going to take my foot off the pedal. And so you can make the notes ring out without using the sustain pedal there. And then on the other tab, we have the filter. All the way to the right, there is an amount slider. This filter operates independent of this other filter. So this is self-contained. And then it's probably easier to show than to tell how this is going to work. You can swell the sound of the filter. And then you can also affect how it decays. And again, I do have these linked. So those are the envelopes. Okay, I want to get to the movement section now. These would normally be called LFOs. We're going to call it movement because not everyone knows what a low frequency oscillator is. And what can you add movement to? Well, you can add it to just about anything on the interface. All the effects knobs down here, you can apply movement to. The volume, pan, octave, and tune. It doesn't really make sense to apply them to an ADSR because they wouldn't work that way, but you can apply them to the amount here on the cutoff. And in a lot of other synthesizers, you see different banks where you have to select the source, destination, and that can get really confusing. So we've made this very intuitive. You just drag and drop. So if you're thinking, I want to apply some movement to the pan knob, I want it to move back and forth, left and right, you're just going to drag it onto pan. And I'm going to turn off B so you can hear this. And you hear it bouncing back and forth. You could add another one to B and then change the speed. So now they're both kind of jumping left and right at different speeds. You can also affect the depth. The delay is going to delay the start of the effect. And you probably notice this little ring around what you've applied it to. This makes it very obvious how to remove these. If you load up a preset and there's some movement happening that you don't want happening, this makes it very easy where when you're on one, you can see what it's been applied to. Same with two. You can bypass them by turning them on and off, and then you can delete them by clicking this X. Additionally, you can change the shape of the movement. Right now we have it on a basic sine wave. And let me show you some different options. And I'm just going to turn off A. Let's just hear B. And then let me also turn up the sustain so we can let it ring out longer. And if you watch the pan knob, you can see how this movement actually moves. So you can hear a pretty big difference when I'm using the square compared to the sine. But we went one step further, and this is actually really, really exciting that we made this custom shapes menu. When you open this up, for one thing, it'll show you what you have selected and you can look at it visually. And then there will be a little indicator at the bottom as it travels across. You may not be able to see this if you're on your phone. But when you open up this menu, you can also draw your own custom shapes. And in this case, I think it's going to be easier to hear if I put this onto tune instead. And then once you've drawn something in, you can also use this smooth tool to kind of round it out if you want. You can also use the shift to move it around. You can change the number of steps if you want to make it just like a binary, or you can turn the steps to 4, make a pattern. And then as you increase the steps, it's going to multiply that. Shift it around. Another cool tool is that you can either right-click or control and drag your mouse to make straight lines. And then additionally, we've saved a bunch of these that we made into this menu. Here's a noise one. Warble. This is kind of like what we did with the H knob. But there's a whole bunch of ones in here that you can take advantage of. Also, you can exaggerate the waveform. If you turn on this shift and then pull your mouse up or down, you can exaggerate whatever shape is in there. You can see right now that retrigger is turned on. And what that means is that this is going to start over every time you hit a key. And let me slow it down so you can see this. If you turn off retrigger, it's going to operate in the background, and this will sync up with your DAW. But now, whatever notes I play, they're all going to be synced up together in their movement. So turning it back on. If we invert, that is going to, it's not going to show you visually, but basically with the tune, this is starting low and going high. If you hit invert, it's going to start high and go low. You can also tempo sync it, so then your rate changes, and then here's a bunch of subdivisions that you can use. This mod wheel button is really interesting, and there's a couple different things you can do with it. So for one thing, it's going to move through this as you move the mod wheel. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to turn up the depth so you can hear it. This is going to give you some glitchy effects. So that's one way that you can use it, but the way that I ended up using it more often was I could take this reverse saw and then apply it to something. Let's say this cutoff filter. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to turn up the depth. And now your mod wheel is applied to the cutoff. Let me delete this from the tune. Now you can always do the Learn MIDI CC thing where you control-click, Learn MIDI CC, wiggle the mod wheel, and then it will also be attached. But this is going to give you a lot more options just to make some different shapes out of it. But really, this is a good thing to get in the practice of turning on the mod wheel and then selecting this one if you just want to use the mod wheel to modulate something or a bunch of things all at once. So I have it attached to the cutoff. Let's go ahead and attach it to the sub. Let's attach it to this reverb. I'm going to turn up this vintage just for a second. I think one of the most underrated things on the entire interface that might go unnoticed if I didn't put special emphasis on it is this vintage knob. I didn't anticipate how important this would be to making things just sound a little bit cooler and less digital. As you turn this up, it's going to create a variable in the pitch. And if you've ever sampled an analog synth, you would know that as you're going up and down the keyboard, it's not tuned the way that you think it is, which can create some dissonances that are actually really cool. And so we have embedded that into our instrument, but with a knob where you can manually affect it yourself. So as you turn this up, things are going to get a little bit more vibey. And you can go more extreme with it. To the right of the vintage knob, you see this mono poly switch. And when we had the idea that we were going to sample all these legendary mono synths, we were pretty convinced that we wanted to just make a mono synth. Although if you've never tried it before, it's really fun to play things with a mono synth or in mono mode. But we also thought it's probably just too limiting not to have the poly option. And that's for a lot of different reasons. But it's great for leads and certain bass things. And so you should absolutely try it. But we decided to make the default in poly mode. For people new to this world, it could be a little bit frustrating. Because as you're playing legato, it's not going to re-trigger these envelopes, so some of your notes disappear. So you have to kind of cater it to the way that you're playing the song that you're playing. And if you do that right, it can be a really cool effect. Every synth that we sampled performs this way. And I think that a lot of people may be surprised that they're set up that way. There were so many limitations at the time that as the technology advanced, it was really exciting. Like the Sonic Six, there was this hack where if you set things a certain way, you could play 2 notes at a time, which was so cool. And then it was like certain synths had 5 notes and six notes and then 8. And then obviously in the digital world, you can play, basically infinite. But it's just another thing that's just kind of like a funny thing about the time that we live in, is that things change so fast that now it's almost unimaginable that you would play a synthesizer where people were really, really excited that you could play 2 notes at the same time. And speaking of leads, there is a glide function here as well, which I use a lot for leads. The higher up you turn this, the longer it's going to take to glide. And then when we just move it to 1%, it's real fast. That's another cool thing about mono mode, is that you can play sloppy and sound really good. Complete garbage, but it kind of sounded like I was playing something cool. Right below that, we have our preset browser. And we put a lot of time and love and energy into this, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. You can use these tags to browse different categories. You can use these stars to favorite or unfavorite a preset, and then you can filter them by your favorites. You can filter them by user presets. You will be able to save your own presets and then look at just the ones that you made. And towards the end, I'll demonstrate more of these. I'm not really going to play any right now. As you add and save more presets, or maybe you're saving some on another computer and then putting them onto your primary computer, you may need to hit this refresh button to have it scan the user presets folder again, and then they'll show up at the end of these lists. Whenever you want to save a preset, you're going to use the cog menu here and just click Save Preset. And then you can create your own tags so you can find it easier. Let's jump down to the effects section, which, by the way, you can turn the entire thing on and off with one click. This is something that seemed actually kind of important to us, to be able to turn things off really quickly, because we are very aware that there's a lot of other synth libraries out there and a lot of presets, and sometimes you load up something and you're like, I think that there's something in that preset that's cool, but I can't tell because there's reverb, delays, LFOs happening everywhere, and I don't even know how to turn everything off. We wanted you to be able to basically turn off everything except the source with just a couple of clicks. So this entire section can be turned off with a click. All of your movements can be turned off with one click. You can turn an oscillator off, and then the ARP, which we haven't gotten to. So you should be able to get back to a raw source with 1, 2, 3 clicks. Let's turn on color and let's hear a little bit of phaser. We modeled this chorus after the Juno 60 chorus. Flanger. All right, under character, we have saturation and drive. Saturation tends to be a little bit more subtle sounding, and drive tends to be more like an overdrive. Next, we have the filter section, and I had already had the cutoff turned down from earlier. And I had showed you how to use this with the mod wheel, but also you can attach just a normal like sine wave to it or any of the other shapes. As you turn up resonance, this is going to create a little bit of a peak right at the cutoff point, which is probably easier to hear than to explain. So as the cutoff is moving, so is the resonant peak. We also have a high pass filter here, and of course you can attach movement to any and all of these. Just in case this wasn't obvious, you can also attach a movement to cut off while you're using it with the mod wheel. Then we have our tone section, and we have noise and sub. Each one of these has a drop-down menu. For the noise, there's white noise and pink noise. The pink noise has a little bit less of the high-end frequencies. And then we have sub, two shapes. There's a sine wave and a square wave. Both of these can be assigned to either A or B. And as I mentioned earlier, these are going to follow the shape of the envelope. So whatever you're doing here, or if you've added movement to pan, if you have your sub going to A with movement on the pan, then the sub is also going to do that. Let's hear the square. And by the way, for this sub, sometimes you want a really like deep subby note, like with your left hand, but you don't want it interfering with what you're doing up high. Let me show you what I mean. Go back to sine wave, and you're thinking, I want a really deep bass, and then I want to jump up high. That sine wave is so loud that it's kind of taken over what I'm playing up here. So we created this option in the cog menu, sub key tracking. That's going to make it so that the sub stays really loud on the low notes, and then it gets quieter as you move up, so it disappears by the time you get up here. Okay, next up we have space, and you can see that there's an A, B button to use this effect on A, B, or both. And I think I forgot to mention that is also the same for the filter. And I'm going to turn my chair around to tell you this. I want to look you in the eye and tell you, at some point you're going to be working on a song or a preset, and the reverb seems like it's not working, or the cutoff isn't doing anything no matter where you turn it, and you are just about to email customer service and say, why isn't this thing working? This has happened to me. It's going to happen to you. And check the A, B buttons. You might be assigning something to A while you're working on B, or vice versa. But this will save you a lot of time and headache if you just remember to check those buttons. Okay, so the reverb has a drop-down menu, and we've introduced a new reverb here, the black hole, and this is based on the Eventide black hole reverb. We have two different types of plates. These sound really, really nice with an analog synth. There's plate and then plate vintage. I believe that the vintage is a bit brighter. And then we have a hall, a room, and a room with a pre-delay. And so some really creative options here. There's a lot you can do with the reverb and delay, including using it, attaching it with the mod wheel like I did earlier. The delay has its own cog menu. You can tempo sync it, put it into manual. You can use this ping pong option where it's going to delay left and right, back and forth. High and low cut. You'll definitely want to use this if you're doing super subby stuff. You don't always want a super heavy reverb on the subby frequencies. So take full advantage of that. And analog, this is going to create an analog pitch drift, and then here's the rate for that with feedback. All right, let's go to the arpeggiator on this other tab over here. You can change the timing right here. You can change the pattern. You can add octaves to it. You can make it swing. You can humanize it. We did this with Voyager guitar. A lot of you really appreciated that. Just makes it sound a little bit more humanized. There's a hold button. You can also use the sustain pedal to hold that. The arpeggiator does tie in with your envelope. And so you can hear that we have a bit of like a longer release happening. We can dial all this in and make it a little tighter. You can see there's a couple more lanes here. There's one for length, so if you want to vary, and actually let me make some more steps here too. The velocity doesn't really matter right now because I don't have this option turned on, velocity to volume. We'll go back to the cog menu in a little bit, but let's go to length, and so you can vary the length of each step. And so again, you're working in conjunction with the envelope. Then we also have a filter here. This is another independent filter. This is another thing that you might run into, and I know this is hard to remember, but you can get to a place where nothing is working and you're not sure why. And especially if you leave the ARP and you're not even looking at it, you may have like filtered something down to where you can barely hear it. And then you're trying to figure out why you don't hear sound. You're turning the cutoff, you're trying the other filter. And very well could be because of the filter on the ARP. So just please keep that in mind. This also goes up to 30-second note triplets. It goes really fast if you want it to. We'll hear a little bit more ARP when we get into the presets. Most of the sections on here can be locked. So if you like the sources that you have dialed in, you can feel free to lock those in and then browse presets. And these will hold to whatever you had them set to. Same with movement. If you have your movement attached everywhere you want it to go, you could lock the source, you could lock the movement, and then you could just hear how the ARP changes or how the effects change as you browse through the presets. Really, really handy feature. And kind of like we've talked about with our drum instruments, it's almost like another way of like getting double, triple, quadruple your presets, because the preset loads one way, you lock one component of it and then keep flipping through, and then you get a whole lot more options. And speaking of, I guess I should just go ahead and mention the other couple of things in the cog menu. Velocity to volume. So this makes your keys velocity sensitive. All of the synthesizers that we sampled are not velocity sensitive, but this one is. And I was thinking of saving this for the end, but since we're in the cog menu, we might as well do it now. It's a tie between the vintage knob, which I said is the most underrated, underappreciated thing on this interface. It's a tie with Randomize. This is going to take all 300 and something of our presets and whatever you've made, and then it's going to combine different elements of them to make new presets. So we'll just click it a couple times. Let's click it again. didn't mean to go into that. That is the randomize function. You'll have a lot of fun with that. You can always save whatever you randomize as a new preset if you get something you like. Okay, let's hear some presets. And I'm going to make a separate video where we do a lot more presets, so I don't want to spend a ton of time here. I'll just do a couple from each category. Let's start with, we'll just go in order here, ARP. Let's go with ARMOC. Mod makes more music. This one I chose because it does something really interesting with the mod wheel. I'm just going to play 2 notes. This is using the arpeggiator, and then it looks like I have all sorts of movement going on in this, but let's just listen to it. And this is what happens with the mod wheel. It's going back and forth between oscillator A and B, which I have tuned differently. Bass, we have a basic 808 here. And then some of these, as you can see, go to more than one category. This ARMOC patch could be in the ARP and the bass, or both. Bass talks. Now this one sounds a little bonkers, but I think I was like replicating a sound from a Tame Impala track. Here's something a little more neutral. This bass shards is super fat and edgy. In case you wanted to see what was going on, a bunch of saturation drive, very resonant. Very cool sound. And then here's a very straightforward one. Let's go to lead. And you'll see that I went ahead and put these in the lead section. These are the presets that I referred to a couple of times. Let's just pick one here. And then I'm going to go to mono mode. I'm going to turn up the glide. So that's the kind of stuff that I was envisioning doing when we started recording these. All right, let's get to some actual saved leads that are kind of already curated a little bit more. This one called lead bass. All right, let's go to pad. Let's do this one, Chorus of the Dead. This one is kind of a pad, kind of keys, and that's the way it goes with a lot of these. I think we've heard anything stringy sounding yet. Flattery, this one has a lot of movement with the filter. And then we'll just do one more, this Brass Symphony, in case you were just wanting to hear something a little more straightforward. All right, Plux, let's hear a loner. Bells 3, I put 4 bells in here. All right, moving on to keys. Let's just go with this first one, A Terror. Let's up the vibe here with Casio EP. Good guy on a motorcycle. That one uses a very complex custom LFO that I kind of used as a step sequencer. Not really what it's for, but it's a way that you can use it. All right, aggressive. That one's called Doom. This one called Magnum Opus. Power up. All right, since we're in aggressive, I'm going to do the most hyper preset that I made. Let's go to Dreamy. Mother of Sighs. Let me know if you get the reference there. All right, let's go over to Dark. Ooh, Doubt. I like this one. I've used this in some of our demos. let's pulse something, another soundtracky one. Karma. Let's go to bright. It's kind of a funny ARP one. One's called Fade to White. Some of the drum sounds I made are in this category. So there's some hi-hats. There's a snare I made. All right, evolving. Eyes in a crowd. And I do have to do this ghost chatter one because this one is so fun and creepy. And I will reiterate that everything you are hearing is being created by these oscillators and noise. This one, Parting the Veil, is fun because it's similar to something we did on a Scarbo patch, which is like shifting the pitches in different directions. It also spreads the stereo image really wide left and right. Let's hear another ARP one. This is, well, we're still under evolving, but this one has an arpeggiator. All right, let's go to this analog category. And there are some more basic ones in here. Which reminds me kind of a Juno 60 patch, but we didn't sample the Juno for this one. Simple. These are the simplest ones. Whirly tube. All right, lastly, we have this complex category. '80s movie pulse. Okay, I've already gone on way too long, so I think I need to wrap it up there. Oracle is out now. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be the first of a series of comprehensive synths that we would really like to do. We're excited to hear what you make. Follow us online at Teletone Audio. The website is teletoneaudio.com. Thank you so much for supporting us. Thanks for watching. And we are so excited to see what you make next.